she wasn't crying. That was what broke him. The first time he saw her, she wasn't crying. That was what broke him. In a room full of children, some laughing too loudly, some quietly weeping, some reaching out with desperate little hands, she sat completely still in her wheelchair, her fragile fingers resting on her lap as if they had forgotten what it meant to move. Her eyes, large and deep, didn't plead. They didn't hope. They didn't hope. They simply watched. As if the world had already taken everything it could from her, and she had nothing left to ask for. Daniel froze at the doorway. He had come to the orphanage with no intention of choosing a child that day. In truth, he hadn't even believed he was ready. Being a single father was already a storm he barely managed to navigate. His wife had passed away 2 years ago, leaving behind a silence that echoed through every corner of his small apartment and every beat of his heart. Raising his 5-year-old son, Noah, alone had taught him resilience, but it had also shown him his limits. And yet, standing there, looking at that quiet girl who didn't cry, something shifted inside him. If this moment touches your heart even a little, take a second right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Silent Hope, if you believe in kindness and second chances. Because stories like this remind us what it means to be human. Daniel walked slowly toward her, each step heavier than the last. He noticed the small details others might overlook, the worn. Because stories like this remind us what it means to be human. Daniel walked slowly toward her, each step heavier than the last. He noticed the small details others might overlook, the worn blanket neatly folded over her legs, the way her shoes were too big, the faint scars along her arms. She looked no older than 8. A caretaker whispered softly that her name was Lily. She had been found abandoned after a tragic accident that left her paralyzed from the waist down. No relatives had come forward. No one had asked for her. No one except silence. Daniel crouched beside her, unsure of what to say, unsure of what he could possibly offer. He wasn't wealthy. He wasn't powerful. He barely had enough to keep his own life together. But when Lily's eyes met his, something passed between them, a fragile thread of understanding, almost invisible, yet impossibly strong. He didn't choose her that day. But he couldn't forget her. Days turned into weeks, and the image of Lily stayed with him. It lingered during quiet dinners, followed him into restless nights, and whispered to him in the moments when Noah laughed or asked questions about the mother he barely remembered. Daniel began to realize that his fear wasn't about whether he could handle another responsibility. It was about whether he could ignore the call of something greater than himself. So he went back. The adoption process was not easy. It was filled with paperwork, interviews, financial assessments, and long waits that tested his patience and resolve. Many questioned his decision. Why adopt a child with such complex needs? Why take on a burden when his life was already so fragile? But Daniel didn't see Lily as a burden. He saw her as a second chance, not just for her, but for himself. When the day finally came, Lily didn't smile. She didn't react at all. She simply allowed herself to be wheeled out of the orphanage, her small belongings packed into a single worn bag. Noah stood beside Daniel, clutching his father's hand, curious but kind. He looked at Lily and offered her his favorite toy car without hesitation. It was the first gift she had received in a long time. The early days were difficult. Lily rarely spoke. She struggled with trust, with pain, with memories that no child should carry. Daniel had to learn everything from scratch: how to care for her physical needs, how to support her emotionally, how to balance his time between two children who both needed him in different ways. There were nights when exhaustion brought him to tears. Nights when he questioned whether he had made a mistake. Nights when the weight of responsibility felt unbearable. But there were also small victories. A flicker of expression when Noah made a silly joke. A slight movement of her fingers during therapy. A whisper of a word after weeks of silence. Those moments became his strength. Months passed, and slowly, Lily began to change. Her eyes softened. Her silence grew less heavy. She started to respond, to engage, to exist beyond the shadows of her past. And Daniel, in turn, found parts of himself healing too. The emptiness left by his wife's absence began to fill, not with replacement, but with purpose. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real. And it was theirs. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. A black luxury car stopped outside Daniel's modest home. At first, he thought it was a mistake. People like that didn't come to places like his neighborhood. But when a sharply dressed man stepped out, carrying a folder and wearing an expression of controlled urgency, Daniel felt a strange unease settle in his chest. The man introduced himself as a representative of a powerful corporation. His words were careful, measured, but they carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. He asked about Lily. He asked about her health, her condition, her life since the adoption. Daniel's protective instincts flared immediately. He demanded to know why. And then came the truth. Lily was not just an abandoned child. She was the daughter of a billionaire CEO. Years ago, her father had been involved in a devastating accident that had torn their family apart. In the chaos that followed, Lily had been presumed lost. Her father, consumed by grief and guilt, had spent years searching for her, quietly, relentlessly, using every resource at his disposal. And now, he had found her. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Daniel looked at Lily, who sat quietly nearby, unaware of the storm that was unfolding around her. The thought of losing her, of having her taken away after everything they had been through, hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't her biological father. But he had become her home. Days later, the CEO himself arrived. He wasn't what Daniel expected. There was no arrogance in his presence, no sense of superiority. Instead, there was a quiet sorrow, a depth of regret that seemed to follow him like a shadow. When he saw Lily, his composure cracked. Years of longing and pain surfaced in a single moment. Lily, however, did not recognize him. To her, he was a stranger. And that truth cut deeper than anything else. The man did not demand her return. He did not assert his power or his wealth. Instead, he made a request, one that carried both hope and heartbreak. He wanted to be part of her life again. He wanted a chance to know her, to make amends, to be the father he had failed to be. Daniel faced an impossible choice. He could hold on to Lily, protect the fragile family they had built, and risk denying her a connection to her past. Or he could open the door to a world far beyond his own, a world of opportunities, resources, and possibilities he could never provide. But also a world that might take her away from him. In the end, the decision wasn't his alone. It was Lily's. With gentle patience, they introduced her to the truth. They gave her time, space, and the freedom to choose. It wasn't easy. It was filled with confusion, fear, and emotions too complex for a child to fully understand. But slowly, something beautiful began to unfold. Lily didn't lose one father to gain another. She gained both. The CEO kept his promise. He supported her medical treatments, providing access to the best specialists in the world. With time, therapy, and determination, Lily began to regain movement, first in her hands, then gradually, miraculously, in her legs. It wasn't a sudden recovery. It was a journey. A long, painful, hopeful journey that required strength from everyone involved. And through it all, Daniel remained by her side. Not as a replacement. Not as a lesser figure. But as the man who had chosen her when no one else did. Years later, on a bright morning filled with quiet anticipation, Lily took her first independent steps. The room was filled with emotion, tears, laughter, disbelief. Daniel stood there, his heart overflowing, as the little girl who once couldn't move now walked toward him with determination and joy. She didn't run to the billionaire's CEO. She ran to him. Because love isn't measured by wealth or blood. It's measured by presence, by sacrifice, by the quiet moments when someone chooses to stay. Before we reach the end of this story, here's a special request for you. Comment below the word hope if you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever. And if this story touched your heart, don't scroll away. Take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Silent Hope. Your support helps keep stories like this alive, stories that remind us of the power of compassion, courage, and unconditional love. Because sometimes, the greatest miracles don't come from money or power.